Hello everyone. So today we will continue with our hypothesis testing session, and we will cover today the learning outcome 3, which is to understand methods used to gather data for testing. So the collection of data is one of the key aspects in hypothesis testing, as you will get to know like what type of data you need. Basically, hypothesis testing is carried out for quantitative methods. So it is very important that you collect the appropriate data. So going forward, we will look into the different methods used to gather data for testing. So for the first one is to analyze the different data collection methods. So here we will look into the different data collection methods used in academic research. Then second would be give examples of when different data collection methods would be suitable, and then explain how data would be collected and recorded. So the first thing is we look into the analysis of the different data collection methods. So data collection methods, they generally vary in their suitability for different research. For example, if you're doing a qualitative research, you would be using qualitative data such as interviews or focus group discussions. But if you're doing quantitative study, then you would want to collect data where data can be collected, which can be analyzed by using quantitative methods. So here we look into the different types of data collection techniques. So the first one is interviews. So in interviews, you have the what is that you collect the opinions and the perspectives of the participants. So here, what happens is you schedule a discussion with the participant on a specific research topic. So in this, you collect the data and then you note down the important points, and then you carry out a detailed analysis of which points are important for and what can be useful for your research. So in interview data collection, there can be many relevant data and there can be many irrelevant data also. So what you need to do is you filter out the irrelevant data and you focus only on the relevant data. So the main advantage of interviews is that it allows in-depth exploration of complex topics. So here you can go deep into the research, as you're not bound by other data collection techniques such as survey research, where you have only a few options given to the participant. Then another advantage is that it permits clarification of response. For example, if the participant has provided some information, then you can ask for more clarification and you can go deeper into the response provided by the participant. Then the third advantage is that it is suitable for qualitative data collection. So like I also said earlier, interview data collection is basically for research where you're using qualitative methods. Then the next one is the disadvantages of the interview data collection. So one of the main disadvantages, or probably you can call the limitations, is that it is time consuming and resource intensive, which means that you have to dedicate a lot of time for collecting data through interviews. For example, you'll have to discuss with the participant, you have to ask clarifications, you have to note down the important points. So it is often time consuming. Then there is a potential for interviewer bias. So what this means is that the researcher may want to focus on the areas where they want to focus rather than getting a response from participants where the participants would like to emphasize more. So that is one of the limitations. Then you have so then another limitation of interviews is that it is limited to small sample size. So unlike survey research where you can send it to a large number of participants, for example, 200, 300, 1,000 participants, in interviews, it is very difficult to like collect data from say 100 sample or 200 sample. So that is one of the limitations. Then you have questionnaires and surveys. So the surveys is that when you have certain questions or statements, and then you provide the participants with certain options, wherein they have to fill in with their responses. So one of the advantages of questionnaires and surveys is that it is efficient for large scale data collection, which means that you can send out the survey questionnaire to a large number of participants over through email, or you can send it through a Facebook group, or you can post it on your social media platform where people who are interested, they can answer the survey. So the questionnaire and survey, they have the flexibility that you can send it to a very large number of participants. Then the second advantage of questionnaires and surveys is that it is standardized and replicable. So which means you prepare the questionnaire in a standard format, and the same format can be replicated for different sets of survey questionnaire. And the third advantage is that it is suitable for quantitative data. So in fact, it is a survey questionnaire is one of the most preferred ways for uh, carrying out quantitative analysis. So for hypothesis testing also, it is preferable that you use survey questionnaire. Then there are also certain disadvantages of using survey questionnaire. So one of them is that limited depth of responses. So this means that the responses are only limited to the options provided by the researcher to the participant. For example, the researcher may say the statement, I am attracted by the Apple brand. So here it would be strongly disagree, disagree, agree, strongly agree. So these are the options that you can give. But if the participants they want to provide more information, like I like the features, I like the storage space, I like the design. So that those things cannot be captured through the survey questionnaire. Of course, you'll have to use different questions for capturing those responses. Then in survey questionnaire, there is also a chance that the participant may not respond. So the response rate of survey questionnaire is often quite low. Then we have it requires careful questionnaire design. So which means that you will have to be very specific in preparing the questionnaire. So that it is totally suited to your research objectives. Next, we look into observations. So an observation is a data collection technique wherein you observe the participants in their natural surroundings. So for example, if you're observing a group of people who are engaged in a meeting in an organization, so that can be an observation. So the main advantage of observation is that it provides objective data. Basically, it is specifically focused on a topic, and then it minimizes the respondent bias. Why? Because the participant is not involved in the data collection. Basically, the participant is not among the it does not interact with the respondents. And then the third advantage of observations is that it provides real-time data collection. So here, what happens is that real-time data collection is carried out wherein the responses by the participants are provided and then they are captured instantly. Then we have the disadvantages of observations. So one of the main disadvantages of data collection through observations is that it is limited to observable behaviors. For example, if a meeting in an organization is going on regarding cost cutting, so the observable behavior is only limited to cost cutting. It is not limited to, it does not extend the scope to how you can venture into new markets, how you can take up mergers and acquisitions or strategic partnerships. So that is one of the disadvantages in observations. Then you have the potential for observer bias. So again, here the observer bias could be the researcher may note down few points and they may miss a few points. So the weightage of the points where the researcher has noted could be higher, which can lead to observer bias. Then you have a resource intensive for extended periods. So uh, so the disadvantage is that observations can be very resource intensive for extended periods. Just a second, I will have to add another participant. Right, so we have discussed the disadvantages of observations. So next we move into the data collection through documents and records. So so here what you do is that you collect the data basically from the existing documents. The common examples could be statistical websites such as Statista or government publications or market research reports or trade reports. So the main advantage of collecting data from documents and records is that it is non-invasive and cost-effective. So non-invasive means that you are not intruding upon the privacy of the participants, and basically the data is readily available to you. So that is, and it is also cost-effective. That means you don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to contact the participants. You don't have to reach out to the participants. So there are no cost involved. So that is one of the benefits of data collection through documents and records. So the second benefit is that it can provide historical context. For example, if you're collecting data for the GDP growth rate of the different countries in a website called Statista or even in government publication, you find the historical records. So that also give you a historical context with respect to the growth and other aspects. So the next is the disadvantages of documents and records. So the main disadvantage is that it relies on the availability and accuracy of the documents. So for example, if you take data from any blog, it may not be very accurate. But if you take a data from a government publication, so that is you can rely on that data. That is an authentic data. So you must be very careful from where you're selecting data. The next limitation is that it is limited to existing data, which means that whatever data has been collected and whatever data is there in the archive, so documents and records, so you can rely only on that data. So the next data collection technique is the focus group discussions. So in focus group discussions, what happens is that you provide a topic of discussion to a group of members, and then they carry out a focused discussion on that. The researcher only observes the interaction of the different participants. One of the main advantages of focus group discussions is that it encourages group discussions, which means that it facilitates all the participants to provide their responses and to interact and submit their perspectives. So the second advantage is that it generates rich qualitative data, which means that one participant may be speaking from their own experience, the other participant may be speaking from their own experience. So that is the advantage of a focus group discussion. Then the next is exploring diverse perspectives. So in focus group, you can have a diversity for example, by age group, by gender, by nationality. So you can capture data from each of the participants. So it explores the diverse perspectives of the participants. Then among the disadvantages, the first one is that the focus group discussions, they require skilled facilitation, which means that the researcher must be very skilled to select a group of participants with the required characteristics so that they can provide useful insights for the research. Secondly, the researcher should be able to direct the conversation well so that it is actually a focus group discussion and not deviating from the research topic. Then the third limitation is that the focus group discussion is generally limited to small size groups, which means you cannot have, let's say, for example, 200 members in a focus group discussion. So in conclusion, each method has its own strengths and weaknesses, and the researcher must ensure that they select the most appropriate technique for data collection for their research. So it is essential to select the appropriate method based on the research objective, the available resources, and the type of data needed. For example, if you want to do a statistical test of, say, multiple regression and correlation, then interview data collection is not suitable for you. You will have to use a questionnaire. A survey questionnaire is the most appropriate technique. So also there is possibility of combining multiple data collection methods. The process is actually called triangulation, which can enhance the validity and reliability of research findings by addressing potential limitations associated with a single method. So this is called a mixed research method. Then also ethical considerations need to be taken in perspective, especially when you're collecting primary data. So some of these include like privacy of the participants, informed consent, voluntary participation, and these are the factors which, when choosing and implementing data collection methods in research. So the next learning outcome is to explain the advantages and disadvantages of different data collection methods. So here we already looked into few of the advantages and disadvantages. So we will just quickly go through once again. So in interviews, we have the interviews, they allow for in-depth exploration of complex topics. So for example, if any social topic where there is no prior data available, so interviews may be the most appropriate way for data collection. So here it allows for in-depth exploration of the topic. And the researchers can also ask clarification. They can seek clarification and can ensure that there is a better understanding of participants' perspectives. For example, the research participant may mean something, but the researcher may have an interpretation of something else. So the researcher can seek clarification, and accordingly, the response can be documented. Then we have adaptability. So interviews can be adapted to the participant's pace and level of understanding. So if the researcher is able to quickly understand the response given by the participants, then the interview pace could be higher. But in case if the researcher needs more clarification, the pace will generally go slower. So that is the advantages of interviews. In terms of disadvantages, interviews can often be quite time consuming, which means that conducting interviews with a large number of population will require one-to-one interaction. For example, if you choose 1 hour and if you have to collect data from, say, 70 participants, it will take 70 hours minimum, because some of the discussions may even extend beyond your scheduled time. So again, so the basic understanding here is that interviews can often be quite time consuming. Then resource intensive. So interviews, they require trained interviewers. That means the researcher need to prepare thoroughly before interviewing the participant, because the researcher wants to extract some knowledge from the participants, and then they should have proper recording equipment and transcription resources. So basically, different resources are required when you are collecting data through interviews. Then the third challenge is interviewer bias, which means that the presence of an interviewer may introduce bias into the responses. For example, the researcher can also speak from their own experience, and the participant can also concur on that. So that means that a bias has been introduced by the researcher in the data collection process. So the next is questionnaires and surveys. So in questionnaires and survey, the main advantage is that they are very efficient for collecting data from a large sample. For example, if you have to collect data from 1,000 samples, so how are you going to do it? You can create a Facebook group of among your friend circle, or you can join some group where you can post the questionnaire. You can send it through WhatsApp, or you can send it through email. So it is very, very effective. Then standardization. So interview questionnaires can be standardized and they are replicable, which means you can use the same format over and over again, ensuring consistency in data collection. Then you have quantitative data. So questionnaires and surveys are especially used for collecting quantitative data that can be analyzed statistically. So, and then among the disadvantages, one of the disadvantage of quantitative data is that it is of limited depth, which means that the participant the response of the participants is strictly limited to the options provided by the researcher. For example, strongly agree, neutral, disagree, and strongly disagree. So this type of Likert scale is generally provided for collecting data through survey questionnaire. Then you have a non-response bias, which means that the response rate of the survey questionnaire is often quite less. And then the questionnaire design. So the questionnaire design must be very effective to capture the details that the researcher wants in a survey questionnaire, or basically which they want to present in the research findings. So in terms of observations, the main advantage of observations is that they provide objective data as they capture behavior or events as they occur. So, when you're observing a certain phenomena, for example, if you're observing, like I said in the earlier example, if you're observing a meeting in an organization and the meeting is about cost cutting, so you get an objective data regarding cost cutting and what is the views and perspectives of the participants. Then you have the minimized respondent bias, which means that the absence of self-reporting minimizes respondent bias. So here what happens is that in many cases, the researcher also self-reports their own observations. For example, in interviews, they interact with the participants, and then there can be a bias. But in observations, since the researcher is not participating in with the sample group discussion, there is a minimum respondent bias. And then the data is captured real time, so which provides an accurate picture of the events. Then among the disadvantages, the main disadvantages is that it is limited to observable behaviors. So observations are limited to what can be observed and may not capture underlying motivations or thoughts. So this is one of the main limitations of the observations. Then you have observer bias. For example, the observer may influence their interpretation of events, because it is ultimately the observer who is capturing the response and they will be presenting the findings. So there is a very high likelihood of observer bias. And then resource intensive, which means that extended periods of observation can be often quite resource intensive. Then the next step is documents and records. So this is another data collection technique. So here the main advantage is that it is non-invasive, which means that you don't have to reach out to any participant and you can capture the existing data, and it does not require direct interaction with the participants. Then it is cost effective, which means that the researcher do not have to travel anywhere, and the data can be, for example, if you are sitting in your laptop and you can get the data regarding the GDP growth, the example which I said earlier. So that is one of the main advantage of documents and records. And again, the historical context, which means the documents can provide valuable historical context. So based on that, the researcher can accordingly arrive at research findings. Then among the disadvantages, so one of the main disadvantage is that the availability of the data, which means that the data availability depends on the existence and accessibility of relevant records. For example, if the data that you want, it is available only on paid journals, then it will be a challenge for you to get them, but you can still get them. But if the data is not at all available, then that means you will have to interact with the participants, you have to collect primary data. And then the accuracy. So, like I already discussed, the accuracy of documents may vary, which means that you need to select your data sources more efficiently and be very careful in that. For example, you cannot take data from blogs, so they are not reliable. But if you take data from government publications or market reports or trade reports, they are generally reliable data. So next we look into focus group discussions. So among the advantages of focus group discussions, so focus group groups encourage group discussion, allowing participants to interact and share their perspectives. So that is one of the advantages. So again, you get a rich qualitative data, which means that they generate very rich qualitative data through group dynamics, which means that one participant may put in their perspective, the other may put in their perspective, which may be totally different from the first participant. So overall, it generates very rich qualitative data. Then they have diverse perspective. So different viewpoints can be explored within the group. Then among the disadvantages, there is skilled facilitation, which means that an effective facilitation is necessary to manage group dynamics and ensure productive discussions in a focus group discussion. Then you have dominant voices. So there can be many dominant voices who would want to dominate the discussion. So the researcher must be skilled enough to handle all of these dominant voices. Then you have small group sizes. So it is necessary that you have an optimal group size so that the discussion is productive and you can get the desired response or basically get useful insights from the focus group discussions. So in conclusion, choosing the most appropriate data collection techniques involves weighing the advantages and disadvantages, and that most importantly, it depends on your research objectives and what type of research that you are going to conduct. So the next aspect is how would data be collected and recorded. So data collection and recording is very useful in research, where you need to understand which is the most appropriate data collection technique and how you would collect the data. So the first thing is selection of data collection method. So here you need to choose the most appropriate data collection method based on research objectives and then available resources and type of data needed. For example, interviews, survey, observation. So you need to decide. So this generally comes from your research problem, your literature review, and the research methodology. So methodology is the most important point where you decide what type of data do you want. Then preparation and training. So if applicable, you need to prepare the interview scripts. For example, if you're going to conduct an interview with a very experienced person, So you need to be well prepared regarding what questions you are going to ask and what will be the depth of discussion. So, and similarly, if you're conducting a survey questionnaire, then you need to understand how what are the elements that you're going to use in the survey questionnaire, what are the independent and dependent variables that you're going to consider. So that is very important. Then accordingly, if you are taking a group the help of a group of team, then you need to train the data collectors to ensure consistency and standardization in data collection. Then piloting. So the piloting is the process of collecting data from a small sample to test the data collection instruments and procedures. So it is generally carried out in like doctorate level dissertation where you conduct a pilot study. And so this helps in identifying and rectifying any issues before full-scale data collection. Then participant recruitment and informed consent. So in this process, you need to identify what type of participants would be suitable for your research. So basically, whether you're going to use random sampling or whether you're going to use purposive sampling, wherein the participants need to possess certain characteristics for inclusion into the sample. So, and then how are you going to recruit participants? For example, are you going to use your professional circles? Are you going to use your family members? Or are you going to use your colleagues? Or are you going to post the survey on a Facebook group, or whether you're going to contact participants through LinkedIn? So these are the different ways of recruiting participants. And then the actual data collection process, which involves administering interviews, distributing questionnaires through emails, through social media sites, and then conducting observations. So here, it is better to follow standardized procedure. So and then provide some time to the participants to respond, and then accordingly, if you're conducting interviews, you have to take prior appointment and schedule the interview. If you're sending data collection through survey questionnaire on email, that you may want to remind the participants that they have to provide their data. So here you need to follow standardized procedures. Then quality control. So what means is that you need to implement measures to monitor and ensure data quality. So this may include periodic checks, supervision of data collectors, and resolving any discrepancies or issues that arise during data collection. For example, in a survey questionnaire, if the participants have not filled any response, for example, they have left a few questions and that is not acceptable for your study, then you have to make those fields mandatory, because unless those responses are filled, the response will not be submitted. So accordingly, these are some of the quality checks that you can undergo while preparing for data collection. So data recording tools. So in data recording, first of all, you have to select appropriate data recording tools. So it may include paper-based forms, or you may use Google Forms, or you may use survey questionnaire form from Qualtrics, or you may use spreadsheets or any specialized data collection software. For example, in qualitative data collection, you may use NVivo is one software where you can use coding techniques for analyzing qualitative data. Then you have to ensure accuracy. So you have to ensure that data recording is accurate and reflects the information collected from the participants. So you need to double check entries to minimize the errors. Then the third step is organizing data. So you need to organize data systematically using predefined categories or codes if applicable. So this facilitates data analysis and retrieval during later stages. So basically, a structured process needs to be followed for data collection. And then security and confidentiality, which means that you need to implement measures to protect the confidentiality and security of collected data. Especially, ideally, you should not collect any sensitive or personally identifiable information. For example, if you're collecting data related to gender, it could be male, female, or other. So this could be your three options. If you're collecting data related to the age, so Rather than asking what is your age, you can ask like what is your age group, whether it is 18 to 24, 25 to 30, 31 to 45. So that way you can avoid collecting any personally identifiable information. Then you have timestamps and metadata. So if relevant timestamps can be recorded and associated with each data entry, this information can be crucial for tracking the temporal aspect of the data. Then you have backup and storage. So you need to regularly back up your data and uh, collected data to prevent loss or corruption. And then you have to store data in secure locations, ensuring compliance with relevant data protection regulations. Then data entry validation. So here you need to implement data entry validation checks to identify and correct any errors or inconsistencies in the recorded data. So that comes into data entry validation. For example, if you have to collect the uh, any numeric response, so you have to give option of only those fields. Then you have documentation. You need to maintain detailed documentation of the data collection and recording process. So this includes the date, time, location, and individuals involved in each step. So here you need to capture all the data points and include in your data collection instrument. So in conclusion, by following a structured and systematic approach to data collection, the researchers can ensure the integrity and reliability of the data, which forms the basis for meaningful analysis and interpretation. So now we look into the merit criteria, which is to justify the selection of data and methods of collection in a specific situation. So in justifying the selection of data and data collection methods for a specific situation, so it is essential to align these choices with the research objective. So remember, I've been telling this in every session almost, that your research objectives are the ones that guide you for literature review, for research methodology, for data collection techniques, for data analysis techniques. So research objective is the starting point. So this I will explain you by considering an example. So let's consider a hypothetical research scenario to illustrate the justification process. So the research scenario is investigating the impact of digital technology adoption on student learning outcomes in higher education institutes in United Kingdom. So this is the research scenario. So basically, this is your research aim. So relevance to research question. The student learning outcomes are central to the research question, and therefore data on learning outcomes are crucial. Then alignment with objectives. So measuring learning outcomes helps to assess the impact of digital technology adoption, which is the key research objective. And then availability and accessibility, which means that learning outcome data are typically available from educational institutions, making them accessible for research purposes. So outcome data could be like number of students who have scored distinction, number of students who have scored merit, number of students who have scored pass out of the total number of students, and in a digitally enabled environment, what is the percentage? In a totally manual environment, what is the percentage? So that provides a basis for comparison. Then you have data collection methods, which means that you can use surveys to collect student learning outcome data. So the quantitative nature of data can be established by using a survey questionnaire. So surveys can effectively and efficiently collect data from a large sample of students across multiple institutions. So across, since you are restricting your research boundary to universities in UK, so survey questionnaire will be very helpful for collecting data from educational institutes based in UK. Then you can standardize the survey questionnaire to ensure consistency and comparability across institutions. So you can use the same survey questionnaire, and probably you can ask like whether your institution is the East Coast or West Side or something, those kind of classification you can give. And then you can consider the cost effectiveness, because surveys are very cost effective. as compared to alternate methods like interviews or observations. Then another approach could be like interviews with educators and administrators, wherein so the main justification for using interviews is that it provides in-depth insights to gather qualitative insights from educators and administrators regarding their perspectives on technology adoption. Then it also helps in contextual understanding, wherein interviews can help researchers understand the contextual factors that may influence learning outcomes. And then it is also complementary to surveys. For example, if you are using mixed research methods, you can collect data through survey questionnaire and you can also collect data through interviews, wherein the interviews complement the quantitative data obtained from surveys. So basically, the summary is that the selection of data and data collection methods is classified based on several factors. The first among them is relevance. So the chosen data collection techniques and methods should align closely with the research objectives. Then you should consider the efficiency of data collection technique. So you can collect survey when you are using quantitative research. The methodology that you have described is quantitative. So you can use surveys, or if you're using qualitative, you can use like an interview or focus group discussion. Then you have standardization, which means that standardized survey questions ensure consistency in data collection. Then you can consider cost effectiveness. So survey again provides the benefit of cost effectiveness. Finally, complementarity, which means that interviews can complement the survey questionnaire to produce rich insights and meaningful interpretation of the research phenomena. So that is all for today. In case if you have any questions, you can let me know.
All right, thank you for the session.